Hi, my name is Brittany Ayers, and I will be going over my signature assignment. The journal article I picked was done on SIDS, which is sudden infant death syndrome, and um, pretty much what the article was trying to figure out was whether there was a correlation between mothers, their infants that where the mothers misused drugs such as methamphetamines, tobacco, and also marijuana versus SIDS in general. So they just wanted to see if there was a correlation with those mothers that used it. Why did the scientists perform the study? Pretty much exactly what I just explained. Like I said, they don't know what actually causes SIDS, but they just wanted to know if there was a correlation between the ones who got SIDS, if their mothers had misused drugs, and if they did misuse drugs, which drugs they actually misused. Specify any possible connections between the exposures and the disease. Um, Now, the connection of the women that did abuse certain drugs, such as, well, it was any of the substances, they saw a change in the brainstem. They also saw that these infants actually had respiratory problems as well. So that was kind of the connection with respiratory diseases. Um, Obviously, that's going to affect the infant's ability to breathe, and in sudden infant death syndrome, these infants just seem to stop breathing. So obviously, if it's a breathing problem and the respiratory system is depressed because of other drugs, it's obviously going to have effect on them. The brainstem, obviously, the brainstem affects the breathing. So if that's affected, then the breathing is going to be affected as well. The study also showed the mothers that used marijuana did not, there wasn't a big correlation between sudden infant death syndrome and the marijuana users. But what they did discover was that the mothers that were tobacco users, smoked tobacco, and the mothers that used uh, opiates, actually there was a big correlation in those infants that died of SIDS. Those mothers, a lot of the mothers did use the opiates or tobacco products. The two major things that the scientists used to find out, whether the mothers were using drugs or not, were surveys. Obviously, they had to interview these mothers and have questionnaires. Did you use any substances while you were pregnant? And if you did use substances, which substances did you use? Obviously, that's going to affect the study, whether they use an opioid or whether they just use marijuana, whether they smoked, things like that. And obviously, using surveys aren't as reliable because people can lie. So for the studies, they also used a urinalysis, which would test to see if the urine had any presence of any drugs that they might have used. So they kind of backed it up both by, okay, well, I'll let you tell me if you use anything, and then if you did use something, or if you did or didn't, then they would be able to find that out in the urinalysis. What were the major results? Did they support or negate the hypothesis? Well, they did find out, like I said before, the opioids and the tobacco were the biggest correlation that they found from their hypothesis, that yes, those two were the major ones that they found a correlation in SIDS, or sudden infant death syndrome. The marijuana, they didn't find any correlation between those two. So the opiates and the tobacco, smoking tobacco, were the two that they really saw that infants that died of SIDS, their mothers did these two categories of substances. And obviously the results supported their hypothesis that that these drugs would have an effect on the babies and with sudden infant death syndrome. Why I chose this particular article. I'm not sure if it's going to say exactly what is in here, but I chose this article because I am a new mother. I didn't do any kind of substances or anything while I was pregnant, but I am concerned about sudden infant death syndrome because they don't know what causes it. So I wanted to know whether there was a big correlation between mothers that abused drugs while they were pregnant or didn't. Obviously, you can see that anything you do that's going to suppress the respiratory system or affect the brainstem is obviously going to have an effect on the child. But that was my main reason. Most of the things that we have to do in class, I try to do related to something that I'm dealing with or something that a close relative might be dealing with, just because that's something that I'm interested in. So I want to know a little more about it. So doing the research on something that's relevant to what I'm going through or what someone else may be going through helps me to have a little more interest in what I'm doing, as with anything. That's my reference that I use, the journal article, and that is all. Thank you for your time.